March 1988. Nothing going on. I don't know. I was in California in the Air Force. Don't remember anything specific about this month. Not even the books I read, which is why I have this list. And we're going to get into it right now. So, March 1988, the very first book I read was Books of Blood, Volume 1 by Clive Barker. Do I need to say anything about this? I don't know, but I'm going to. I wrote down the table of contents in my other little notebook. So for those of you who don't know, Books of Blood, short story collection by Clive Barker. It includes The Book of Blood, which is kind of just a nice little introduction to the short story collection. The Midnight Meat Train, made into a movie starring Bradley Cooper. It's a pretty good story about I believe it's a photographer who witnesses a murder, something mysterious going on in the subways, or the tube, if it takes place in England, but I don't remember. And follows up on it, and weird, crazy, gross things happen. The Yattering and Jack, which was made into an episode of Tales from the Dark Side, maybe? One of those types of shows. And it's about a guy fighting a mischievous demon. Pig Blood Blues, I believe. So I saw two different table of contents. But I believe that's one of the stories. Sex, Death, and Starshine, which is a really wild story about a theater company and some creepy things that happen when they're in the middle of a production. And one of my favorites, In the Hills, the Cities. I love this story. I think this was the one that really solidified for me the wild imagination of Clive Barker. I suppose we're going to get a little spoilery. I don't know, because I'm going to tell you. It's about, I think it's two couples on vacation that find these two cities that have an annual, every 10 years? I don't know how often, competition. And basically what they do is everybody in the village forms a giant person. They strap themselves together, and each city makes themselves into a giant. And Clive Barker, I mean, just the descriptions of how they make the knees and the elbows, the joints work using people's bodies, but they make themselves, each village makes themselves into giants, and then they fight. It's crazy. So anyway, Books of Blood Volume 1, Clive Barker. It's good stuff, and a good introduction to his work if you've never read it before. Book 2 was The Cat Who Had 14 Tails by Lillian Jackson Braun. And it's just 14 short mystery stories featuring cats. I don't believe they all have Jim Quillerin, who's the main character of the Cat Who series. And they don't all have his two Siamese cats. There's just different cats, different stories. I believe. It's been a long time since I read it. But again, simple, cozy mystery fun. Borrowed this from Mom. Book 3, Money Men by Gerald Petovich, which is another treasury agent going up against counterfeiter. This young treasury agent who's undercover is murdered, and so our main character is trying to figure out his murder and bring in some counterfeiters. But it's good stuff. I like Gerald Petovich's work. Book 4, The Little Drummer Girl by John Le Carré. I've always said his name that way. I'm not sure if that's the appropriate way to say it. Let's see. I'm recording this at the end of December 2020. It's the day after Christmas. And Jean Le Carré passed away a week ago, 2 weeks ago, within the last 2 weeks, I think. Little Drummer Girl is about an actress who is pulled into the spy game. She's supposed to go undercover to try and stop some terrorist activity, I think. And I think she may or may not fall in love with the person she might need to bring in. Obviously, it's been a long time since I read it. And it was made into a movie with Diane Keaton in the lead role. I've seen the movie. Obviously, I've read the book. Not a huge fan of John Le Carré. His writing style didn't really grab me. But I know he's huge. They made tons of movies. People read his books. I may go back and try him again sometime. Next, I'm going to stop numbering where we're at. And I have to check my notes here. But next we have Polo Solo. Polo Solo by Jerry Keneally. Not sure. It's the first in a series about a private investigator in San Francisco named Nick Polo. And in this one, the mayor of San Francisco is being blackmailed, and Nick Polo has to figure out who did it, solve the mystery. Not sure I have any. I think there might be one more of these Nick Solo books on the list somewhere, but didn't grab me. Next, we have Slob by Rex Miller. This is Rex Miller's first book. I don't know if it's most popular, this and Chain Gang maybe, but Slob introduced us to Detective Jack Icord, I suppose is how you say his name. Specializes in tracking down serial killers, but more importantly, it introduces us to Daniel Bunkowski, also known as Chain Gang, who is just this huge mountain of a crazed serial killer. I believe after this, he was in 4 more books. Chain Gang. Second one is Chain Gang, if I'm not mistaken. That could be the third one. I don't know. But anyway, he's just, slob is the perfect word to describe this guy. Just huge, overweight, disgusting, but I believe super smart and super psychotic. Just some of the, I looked at some reviews, and super villain levels of evil was essentially the way someone described Chain Gang. But so Slob by Rex Miller, I know it's hugely popular in the horror psycho serial killer fans group. I don't know where I was going with that sentence, but it's one worth checking out. Next up, we have Watchers by Dean Koontz. I believe if anybody's watched all of this series, and I think you might have to go all the way back to years and years and years and years ago when I started. The first Dean Koontz book I read was Shattered, I believe, and I did not like it. And so this is just the second Dean Koontz book that I ever read, Watchers. I remember being at the mall, going to the bookstore. It was on I feel like there was a cardboard display, but it could have just been on the wall of new releases. I picked it up and read the back, and it sounded interesting. So I bought it and I read it, and I really liked this book. It's about a dog that's been experimented on by the government, so it's got superpowers, and it escapes, and this kid finds it, and of course they become best friends, but the government's after it. So think Firestarter with a dog instead of a young girl. But I really liked it. And I definitely, as you'll see if you keep watching these videos, read a lot more Dean Koontz after this. But that's Watchers. It's been made into a movie with a number of loosely related sequels. Turning the page here. And now we're going to get into some actual books that I can show you. The next book was The Godwolf Manuscript by Robert B. Parker. This is the first Spencer novel. I love these covers. And a rare manuscript is stolen from a university. They hire Spencer to get it back. And of course, it's never as simple as one might think. But The Godwolf Manuscript, the very first Spencer book. Next, the penultimate book on this list is God Save the Child by Robert B. Parker. It's the second Spencer book. Excuse me. And it's about a kidnapping. Kid disappears. Spencer's hired to get the kid back. This is the book that introduces Sarah Silverman. And reading this, and this is not the first time I read either of these books, but when I did read them for the first time, one of the things I noticed that was different about these Spencer books, in my opinion anyway, was the connection that flowed throughout all the books. In the first one, the Godwolf manuscript, Spencer gives his number at the end of the book, gives his phone number to the university dean's personal assistant or receptionist. I'm not sure. She's sitting in the desk outside his office, so personal assistant, I guess. And Spencer gives her his phone number. And then when we move on to the second book, God Saves the Child, Spencer's dating her. But he meets Sarah Silverman, and he starts dating her as well. And it's not a case of, like, he's not cheating on the other woman. They're casually dating. There's no exclusivity. But now we've got a female character that's carried over from one book to the other, which in this type of book, these private detective novels, typically, at least for me, I was used to just the private detectives are always sleeping around. It's a James Bond kind of thing. But now we've had carryover, and we've met Susan Silverman, who becomes Spencer's love interest with some rocky patches through the entire series. And then the final book that I read is Mortal Stakes, the third Spencer book. He's still dating Sarah Silverman. They're getting serious at this point. Actually, I feel like this might be the book where he's still dating both. Because there's a Major League Baseball player, his wife is being blackmailed, Spencer's hired to figure it out. It's not as simple as it seems. But I think Sarah Silverman, I think he's still dating both in this book as well. And then we will get to, eventually, the next book, Promised Land, which is where they sort of Spencer and Sarah Silverman define their relationship. So again, for me, it was interesting to see that progression of the characters, which was something I wasn't used to seeing in this type of book. But anyway, so Mortal Stakes was the last book I read in March of 1988. And you might have noticed a trend there at the end. The last 3 books I read in the month were the first 3 Spencer books. Little preview. Yeah. I read, it looks like 11 books in April of 1988, and 10 of them are by Robert B. Parker. So strap in for that. And you'll have to tune in if you just want to know what that 11th book was. All right, so that's all I've got for March 1988. A pretty interesting mix, in my opinion, of different books. Although quite a lot of mysteries and stuff, but there's some horror in there. Watchers, Dean Koontz. Not really horror, more of a science fiction thriller. And not, spaceships and stuff, science fiction, but government experimenting on a dog. Definitely not as horrific as Firestarter, but it was a fun book. Slob is definitely horror. Books of Blood, definitely horror. I think the rest are all mysteries or thrillers. But anyway, that's all I've got. Not a bad month. Wish I could remember what the hell I was doing with my life. Besides, protecting the country. All right, that's it. I'll see you next week. Until then, read more books.